About a minute.
But you see, acquiring the farm wasn't easy. And building a house wasn't easy. Because we wasn't making enough money to do what we was doing.
Well, now what? I'm just telling Derek this, but see what Papa made. See, I wasn't working back then because I was taking care of children because I didn't go to work till both of them were in third grade, and then I didn't leave them. Papa always wanted me to be home with the children when they got out from school. He didn't really believe in parents, women working, truthfully, and I didn't either. I didn't want to be away from them. So when they got to be in the third grade, I was just sitting at the house and didn't have anything to do. And I called this lady at the Ellington Clinic and asked her if she had a job, and she said, part time. So I started part time, then worked into full time. But anyway, when we were living mostly up until then on just a school teacher's pay, one to school teacher's pay, which wasn't a whole lot of money. And so when we, I was like, I tell you now, that's all we had. Oh, and then he wanted to buy the farm. He found this land. He wanted to buy the farm. I said, there's no way. We can't pay for it because it takes everything that he makes. We even had an insurance policy that he dropped when he got out of the service. It cost $6 a month for $10,000 worth of life insurance. And we didn't have $6 a month to pay, and so we let it drop. Years later, I told Candy, I said that was I wish we had ever done that because you can't buy anything for $6 a month, $10,000 worth. She said, well, why didn't you do it? And I said, we didn't have $6 a month to pay for it. She said, Mother, you didn't have $6 a month to pay for insurance. I said, Candy, we did not have six. Everything we had we had to pay rent, groceries and gasoline, and it wasn't easy. So anyway, we passed up that. So I told him, I said, we can't buy a farm. We don't think to pay for it with. So he says, well, I think I'm going to go into the National Guard, and that paid him. I don't remember how much. He can remember, but anyway, he says if I make enough being in the National Guard to pay for make the payments on the farm each year, will it be okay if I buy it? Well, I said, yeah, if you want to do it that way. So I'll have enough every month for my school teaching to pay the bills. So that's how he got the farm. Him getting to the National Guard. If it wasn't for that, I guess we would have never had the land. So that's another story. But I couldn't see, and Papa could. Well, I was more like this than Papa, but until I could see how we were going to pay for something, I wouldn't buy it. That's right. I was frugal.
Because I tell my phase of when I was in Marshall teaching vocational agriculture, they came out with the GI Bill, where a GI could buy a farm for so much money. All right, I had joined the National Guard, and she and I had an agreement. If I could buy some land, find some land to buy, then I would use my National Guard money to pay for the farm, and I was going to get it through the GI Bill at 3%, 40 years to pay. So in Marshall, I started looking for land. I went to one place and it wouldn't qualify for two reasons. It was too high in price and they wouldn't sell the minerals. I went to another place and it was too high in price. In other words, it was over $7,000. And so I was looking for a place that I could buy for less than $7,000, and so in Marshall, the land down there was selling for $150 most anywhere. So I gave up in Marshall. Then when I moved to Queen City, then I've been here in the neighborhood a little over a year, from June to the following October. Well, and I ran into this 240 acres for sale, and the man was going to finance it. So I didn't have to have the GI Bill. The only thing I had to do was have his permission for me to pay him so much a month, so much a year, at 5%. So I bought that land. Then I found another place a year later for sale, 150 acres. So I was wanting to buy 150 acres and then 127 acres next to it, but they didn't join, and the two pieces of property had to be joined, but they didn't qualify. So I was working on qualification, and a man ran under me. He found out the place was for sale, and he had the money, and he put the money on the table, and the man, 81 years old, picked it up, and so I got half my land stole from him by a man having the ability to buy, and I didn't. So I bought one place, and then I bought another place on the GI Bill. So we're paying about $400 a month, a year, $180, 69 and 69 is about $140, and $339, $33.33 a year for buying that land. See. Then I tried to build a house. So I went to Dallas and made an application to build a house on the GI Bill on the national level. They sent me a certificate. When I got ready to build a house, I wrote for the money, and they didn't run out of money. We went from a Democratic primary or Democratic government to a Republican government, and so the Republicans cut it all out right after the Korean War. Eisenhower went on as president, and everything stopped right there. The Soil Conservation Service, it stopped. The Farm Home Administration, it stopped. Everything just stood still with the government. And also the GI Bill was building houses on the GI farm. So everything stood still, and I went to the Farm Home Administration. They wouldn't let me have it. So one day I was working for the Soil Conservation Service in 1958, and the man that I made application from walked in my office where I was working for the Soil Conservation Service, and he says, "Joe," says, "they've done turned it loose and let you have money for your house." So then I had to find a house plan. So I went and got a house plan. I took it to him. First, a man had to come out and approve it. So I went to the county commissioner and asked him, "Mr. Milam, please go out there and mow that and grade that road going up past the Gillespie place. The man's going to come out and look at it so I can build me a house out there, and I sure would like for the road to be graded." So he did. He accommodated me. I was teaching two of his sons in school. So, and the day we left Linden and started for the farm to check the farm, it started raining, and it rained from Linden all the way to the farm. And when we started up that freshly graded road, we stuck on the first hill. You had to get out, walk in mud that deep over your shoes. The man said, "Well," said, "I'll let you have money to build a house, but I'm not going to let you have it $8,200. I said, "Sir, I can't build it for that. I said, it's going to take at least 12. Can't let you have it 8,200. So I started building that house on limited funds.
That was the first one.
And in other words, ain't nothing been good.
Easy.
And so we started building the house on limited funds. One man, I got a contractor, a carpenter, to say he would build it for so much money. I was going to hire him by the hour. Your grandmother went and we together got it done for so much money. All right. Well, so we couldn't brick the house. We couldn't put a carport on it. We just had to build a house 50 feet by 30, 1,500 square feet. A living room like this one here, a kitchen, and a sitting area. And then if you cut this house off right across that door there, then this was where the kitchen was here, and the sitting room down there, and the living room was right there, and then down the hall was your father's room, and then the bathroom right where that bathroom is. Didn't have no air conditioner. Wasn't no stuff. Had a heating unit right there, but not an air conditioner, just heat. No, we didn't have no heat.
We had baseboard heat.
We had a baseboard. We had baseboard heat, and there was a closet right there. Wasn't no. And then Carolyn, Candy's bedroom, our bedroom, and Randy's bedroom. The same pattern we got right here at this house, except it didn't offset. It was just straight. See, this has a T-set, but ours was just straight. And I built that house, and I needed $400 to brick it, to buy the brick and put brick on that house. I did not have $400. I had to put John's Manville siding on it. And if I'd have took the money I bought for John Manville siding and added $400 more to it, but I couldn't get it. And so we raised your mother and your father. You raised your father and your father's sister in that house, and they went off to college. Well, I retired in 71 and 72. Retired in 72, and then on January the 21st. January the 19th, 1973, well, my mother-in-law had come up and visited with us, and she was going to go home. And we had salmon croquettes the night before, and Carolyn asked me to wash the breakfast dishes. And I took the skillet and I put it on the stove, and I turned the electric heat on, and I had to go make a telephone call. Didn't have to, but I was wanting to. I had a project on. I was trying to do something with nothing. And so got through talking on the telephone, and instead of walking back past the stove right here, instead of walking through that door and past the stove, and then on out, no, I went through from the telephone through the living room, through that door there, and then out. And I went to the barn and started working at the barn. And a man drove up to the barn and said, "Joe," says, "your house is on fire." I said, "What?" He says, "Your house is on fire." And I came to the door of the garage I had there in the barn, and about that time, the kitchen sink window blew out. Pow! Black smoke started coming out of that something. I went to this door right there at the house, which was the north exit, and I opened the door, and flames just took off my eyebrows and singed my hands up to where my coat was, all on my head, and I couldn't get in. So a man come by, and I told him, go call the fire department and call. And I don't know who called Carolyn. I think
Olin
he did.
Harper called me.
Olin Harper. Well, that's the man I was thinking about. He called Carolyn and told her the house was on fire. So she came out to the house and had a fire truck out there putting it out. The fireman walked up to them, said, "Well," said, "we got your house out." Carolyn was standing out in front of the yard and says, "No, you don't have that house out." Says, "That's smoke coming out that louver there."
Flames were coming out each end.
And he says, "Lord, that is right." I said, "Well, we can't do nothing about it."
I told him I was going in. They weren't
Said-
doing a
said,
thing to get
we
the
don't,
thing
we
out.
we don't have our.
I said, I'm going in there and get some things out of there.
And he said,
He said,
you
no,
don't."
you can't because the
You
roof
know,
will come
the-
down. But
the-
we've got the fire out. And I said, no, you don't. It's shooting out each end. And he said, well, it sure
You
is.
never-
Then they started taking stuff out, which was clothes, which you couldn't wear because it had water stains on them. You couldn't get them out.
We should have taken drawers out. Where all your valuables are in drawers. You know, your knives, forks, and spoons, silverware, and if you have anything, your jewelry is usually in drawers and so forth. We'd have taken drawers out, we'd have saved a lot more than we did.
Well, anyway, when the man told me that the fire was out and then we discovered it wasn't, he says, well, we're out of water. They had a pumper truck, and see, didn't have a hydrant or anything to hook up to. He says, we don't have any water in the pumper truck. I said, we've got a pond down here. You can pump water out of the pond to get in the truck and come up here. And he says, our pumping unit's broken. So there wasn't anything they could do. So then they started throwing stuff out. But
So
it's too late.
we
anyway, we made
moved from there with what we had salvaged, put it in the barn. Rats started eating on it, and we moved into an apartment uptown in Queen City, and
We've had our little ups and downs.
we
haven't
started trying to find a house, and I got book after book, and we looked through it, and we looked through it. Never could find what she wanted. She wanted it just as simple as it could be. She wanted a bathroom on one side of the house and a bathroom on the other side of the house with a hallway going to the bathrooms and rooms on the other side of the house. And
we finally
so,
found a
so
place.
finally I located one.
Yeah,
And I asked the lady if I could borrow her house plans, and she said yeah. So I borrowed those house plans, and I drew the house plans and adding to it the way I wanted them added to. She had a carport and I wanted a garage. And she didn't have a front porch and I wanted a front porch. And so I had the ability to draw. A little bit of engineering drawing was still effective, and so I put my engineering drawing skills to work. And I drew the house plans and I took them and had them blueprinted. And gave the blueprints to myself, and me and a carpenter started building the house. Now it took us from about 14 months to decide what we wanted: the color of the roof, the color of the brick, and the house plan and so forth. So from January of '43 till April of 44. Now had the foundation dug.
Not 43.
73 to 74. All right.
Yeah.
Now in April of '74, well, I had the foundation dug, 5/8 reinforcing rods in there tied every way. And I was waiting on concrete truck and it started raining. Rain. And when it got through raining, well, all the sides of the entrenchment and started sloughing in and so forth, had to start all over again. Then I finally got the foundation dug out and reinforcing wires bars and so forth put in, and I used a tube of 12s, and I found out the tube of 12s was too high. I had to lower it down 2 inches, and I couldn't figure out how in the world I was going to lower that thing down 2 inches. And finally I talked to a man that couldn't read and write, and told him what my problem was. He said, "Well, that's not hard to solve, Joe." He said, "All you got to do is take the tube of 12 off and put a tube of 10, you got it with." I said, "Lord have mercy, how simple can you get?" And so we poured 72 yards of concrete in that house. We had a floating beam. You know, that hill could fall out from under it. On one end, it still stay right where it was. And I started building a house. It took me 13 months to build. And she was, and other people were building houses and getting in them in 4 months or 3 months. And she said, "Well, I don't see why it's taking you so long." And I said, "Me and Jack Slope." And we were. We took our time. And so I put her in the house. And that was the one
And there
I sold.
we stayed until you sold it.
Yeah. Huh?
There we stayed till you moved me out.
Now we still owed on the house that was burned down. We still owed $6,000 of that $10,000 we still owed, because I had added to that at a later date, about 2 or 3 years later, $3,200 for the 2 barns out there. See, so we had in our house insurance went from $44. Our house rent went from $44 to $66. Cost $20 to buy a month to buy the barns, and $44 to buy the house. And when the house burned down, we still owed for the barns and
we had $8,000 worth
and so we had to build the house back and pay for one that hadn't been paid for. So and then about that, see, your mother and daddy was getting married. We was paying for their. I had just paid for their wedding. Your aunt Candy, she was getting married and had to pay for her wedding. And so I done spent that money before I burned the house down, but I sure did need that money to help build the house back. Didn't see no.
And didn't you? Then we got the kids some cars in there somewhere.
Well, now we'd bought the cars earlier before the marriage. They used the cars to get married
You wanted
with.
to put an air conditioner. Randy's car was a little blue Malibu Chevrolet, and he and his daddy went up to Texarkana, went over, looked in some kind of a yard up there, and bought this car, but it wasn't air conditioned. So we brought it back, and before Martha and Randy married, Joe came in and he says, "Randy can't take a new wife in a car with no air conditioning." So they went and put an air conditioner in a car for Martha, because she was
Had to fix the hood. Had to fix. Randy had done the same thing to a car just south of Henderson that your mother did to that dump truck. Now I had a yield. Well, the girl, instead of her going through the yield, Randy thought she was going through the yield because there wasn't no cars coming in his mind. But the girl thought she should stop at a yield, so she stopped. But he didn't. And he hit the back end of her car, and he called me. He says, "Daddy," says, "I ran over something in the road and knocked a hole in my radiator." I said, "Get the son of a gun patched and come on home." "Well, it won't quite do. You and Uncle Ron will come after." Went down there, and the radiator pushed back against the fan, and the hood had to tie it, was flopped up. So we tied the hood down and hooked onto it with the wrecker and brought it home. So I took it and got the radiator patched and straightened up. And we tied the hood down till they got married. So I had to get his car fixed, and had to put a air conditioner in it, because he got married in August. we'd get married in January where he could use the heater. No, he had to get married in August. And so we're not married at all. And he wouldn't wait till he started making any money. See, he just graduated from college and got married before he ever had a job.
Yeah,
Now he had a job coming up.
that wasn't.
Huh?
He didn't use his head on that.
Well, he had a job coming up.
I know, but I said about getting.
Honey,
He ought to have a job
your
before
daughter
he get
didn't have a
married.
job, and her husband didn't have a job.
Didn't she have a job?
No,
down
ma'am.
at,
No, ma'am.
teaching
She
school
did
and
not
he was
get.
still
She
going
did
to
not
school?
get that job till she went back to book. Now, and the job she got was as an aide. She didn't have a job
yeah,
teaching.
It was, and then she got on when that woman got pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah, they neither one of them used their heads. So get your education and a job before you get married.
Well, I didn't have my education.
Well,
I was worse
the
than
war
them.
came
They
along.
did.
You were in the Army and you were pulling down a paycheck when I married you. It wasn't much, but you were at least employed with the Army. You didn't finish
I
your
did have
education.
a paycheck. Yeah,
you
I've
had
been
a paycheck.
gainfully employed since March.
So how did y'all feel when my dad went to Vietnam?
Well, he went to Vietnam on my birthday. In other words, he left Queen City on September 17th, 1971. And well, you didn't have.
I hated for him to go, and I told her to try to get out of it.
That was earlier though. In other words, as before he went on active duty. See.
Yeah, that was when he went to service.
Yeah,
Of course, he had to go,
that was from
because he had gotten this money, see, from the government to help him get through this ROTC program. So he had to go. But then when he had to go to Vietnam, I said, why don't you try to get out? See, at one time, during, I guess it was World War II, if you had somebody that had gotten killed in the service, then like they wouldn't send the other son in that same family overseas. You might have to go to service, but not overseas. And I was thinking maybe he could get something like that during this Vietnam deal. And I said, maybe you could use Papa's brother that had gotten killed in World War II, And he said, no, I'm not going to try it because, this is an obligation and I'm going. And so, of course, I hated it. And then, but he wouldn't try to get out. He said, I feel like this is what I need to do.
I had given him all the advice that I could give him when I asked him to join the ROTC. I was wanting him to be responsible for his own decisions. Now, a lot of times they don't tell you what to do. In the Army they tell you what to do, but they don't tell you how to do it. That's all part of SOP, so to speak, So I was wanting him to be, at least be an officer. And because there's a lot of difference in being a filler. See, being an officer filler is different than being just a filler, where you go in and get a ROTC, and when you get a replacement, someone got killed, and you go fill his place. See? So.
But anyway, the day that he had to go, that he stayed 2 or 3 days with us, I guess, where he had to leave to go to Vietnam, and then Papa, he had to leave.
I had to leave to go to school. See, I had to get.
He was so glad he could get out of the house, see, and so he got out.
I wasn't glad I could get out of the house. That's the way you feel about it.
Yes, it was.
I had to go in his room while he was asleep and tell him goodbye. Take care of yourself. That's all I could tell him.
And
Then I turned and went and got in the truck and drove to Paul Pewitt. You see, I got fired. Now, my son was in the Army, getting ready to go to Vietnam, and had been in there since August. And everybody knew that he'd been in there since August. But yet I got fired. Now, that was the compassion that the people used that I worked for. And they didn't care what we as a family was going through. They wasn't going through it, never had been through it, and wasn't going to go through it. So, but anyway, and so I had changed jobs, and I was on a brand new job, and I hadn't been working on that job but a month, and I was I was trying to get reacclimated to something that I was, and they didn't have facilities for me to teach with. I was teaching in a temporary classroom that was a dressing room for that the basketball people used at the back end of a gymnasium. It wasn't desirable. I was driving the school bus, had to go over and drive the school bus to school, drive the school bus home. The kids was hollering and screaming and squalling all the time.
Well, anyway, getting back to Randy
anyway, it
leaving
wasn't
that
desirable.
morning, Papa had already gone, and so I was getting ready to go to work, and so I went in, waked him up, and I thought, Lord, if I can just get through, getting him on his way, because he was going to drive, I guess, back to Houston or something. And, without me blubbering, breaking down. So, anyway, I fixed him some breakfast, and Randy was always forever losing stuff. He was forever. Well, he wanted to say, have you seen my belt? His army belt or whatever he wears. I said, I ain't seen it. Well, he couldn't find his silly belt. Well, then we started looking for a belt. And we looked all over the house. We looked under beds. We looked everywhere trying to find his belt. I can't remember to this day if he even found it or not, but he had to leave at a certain time. And so either he went with or without his belt. He probably will remember, but we were looking for it. Well, that got my mind off of him, wanting to cry, because I was trying to find this belt so he could take off. So anyway, I don't think I broke down. I don't think I cried or anything when he left. And then I got right in the car and went to work. I thought, I got to be with people to get away from here, I know if somebody says something to me about Randy leaving, I just can't take it. Well, I got down there and everybody was really, come on, hi, just like nothing unusual had happened. And so then I'd been there maybe an hour when this one woman comes up and she says, well, Carolyn, did he leave or something like that? Of course, that brought it all back to me, I said yes, and so then I went to the bathroom, squalled a little bit, and then I came back out, and nobody else mentioned it, so I did very well. But anyway, it was not easy to see him leave. And I was all for him calling his congressman to see if he could get out, and he said, nope, this is what I need to do. So.
Did he write you or call you at all when he was over?
But yeah, he I don't know, I don't think he ever called. If he called, he could talk to Martha. I mean, he was, called Houston. But, yeah, he wrote. I don't remember how much he wrote, do you?
No, I don't recall.
Because usually he was caught writing her, which, that was what he should have done. But, anyway, we were just, when he brought Martha in the first time to meet us, I think I told you this before, she was so cute. And she came in that door with him, and she had long blonde hair, and it was real long, and she was real thin, and I never will forget, she had on boots, and that was for people in Queen City knew this was stylish to have boots up like this, and here she came in, and I thought she looked so, like a big city girl, from Houston, and here she came in with her boots.
She was a big city girl from Houston.
Yeah, she always was, always has been, but anyway. And so they hadn't been there any time, till Don called. Wanted to talk about getting married.
Her daddy called me on the telephone, wanted me to interfere with the marriage. And
why?
I told him, well, nothing I could do about it.
Because he wanted Martha to have her education. They had always said for her never to get married till she had gotten her degree or something. And see, she was just a freshman. And he talked to Papa on the phone, says, don't you, discourage him from getting married because she didn't have her degree. Papa said, my son did what I asked him to do. He said, I asked him to get through college before he thought about getting married. He's done that. If your daughter won't do it, there's nothing I can do about it. So that shut Don up. And that was the truth. We didn't have any control over Martha. And so anyway,
I couldn't own her home. I didn't bring her to Queen City, and I wasn't gonna take her back to Nacogdoches.
So anyway, they were upset about that, because she was not doing what they wanted to do.
But
Anyway, they got married, and she was really, well, you've seen her wedding pictures, She was always much prettier to me than Carla.
Yeah, I'm both.
Now, Carla's a cuter size than your mother now. I think she's still slim and everything. But Carla's never had as pretty a face to me as Martha. Because hers has been fuller, more like Willie. I think Willie has a pretty face. And I think, Martha's more round faced than Carla. Carla's got a cuter shape, but you can't have it all, I guess. One or the other. So anyhow.
There's all you can do is see. I had been in combat, and you don't fight all the time. So sometimes attacking a hill, and it just takes less than 10 minutes. You're either alive or you're dead, or you're wounded in 10 minutes digging a hole. Now, either you're digging a hole to bury somebody, or you're digging a new foxhole to protect yourself from a counterattack, and then it's all over.
Have you got to listen to all this again on tape?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, poor Derek.
See,
See, we can talk better just to you if the thing turned off.
And once you get yourself committed, you got to go on through it. Either live or die. That's what it's all about. Just like when your daddy made up his mind that he was going to go down to retrieve some people where he got distinguished service calls. He was committed. He started down, and when he started down, he had to go, and he stayed. And when he started up, he would either come out of it alive or come out or don't come out of it. Once you commit yourself, that's it.
Derek, we tried to find when your daddy.
It's like the last statement I said. The advice I have for any couple or any individual: once you're committed, and live your commitment. A vow is a vow. Whether it's a vow to Jesus Christ, or whether it's a vow to your wife, there's no difference in it. Total commitment is total commitment. There's no reservation. You don't say, if so and so, I'll do so and so. Yeah, that's not in the problem. And you always try your best to do what is best for all concerned, and try to do it so that all concerned will approve of what is being done. And that's just how sometimes you don't, to me, you don't do anything in a dictatorial way. You don't tell people nothing. You try to live within as harmonious framework as you can live throughout life, on the job, at church, and I would say that every person's lifestyle should reflect through their face, their character, and their ever being the life of Christ. That's it. You, Nick.
And I say just ditto. I do want to say though that I feel like that our marriage was planned by the Lord, because it was such a strange courtship that we had. We hardly ever dated. I guess not more than a month in all did we even go together. And I feel like that if it wasn't the plan of the Lord that we get married, that it never would have come to pass. And so I feel like he put you on this earth for me, and hopefully, and I think he feels the same way about me. And always try to put God in the center of your life and do as you think he would want you to do. And raise your children in the way that he thinks you think that he would want you to raise them. 'Cause that's a big, big responsibility. And
Yeah,
he is
I
my,
have.
now let me say this and then I will be through.
I thought you was through.
No, I thought I was
She's
too.
just getting started.
No, I'm not. But really, we did have a strange courtship. But he is, you know, he's been always there. You know, he's been the rock, I guess you'd say that you. And even today, as you get older, I think you realize more and more how you need your spouse than you did when you were young. When you were young, you felt like you could do it all yourself. And as you get older, you realize that was never the way it really was, but that was the feeling you had. But you just need each other so much, and I just thank the Lord that He's let us have these years together.
It goes back to my military training. You tell people what to do, but you don't tell them how to do it. In other words, I can suggest you go peel potatoes, but I'm not going to tell her how to peel those potatoes. She's going to peel them the way she wants to. You know what? She might start at the top, and there's 2 or 3 different ways to peel a peach. You can start at the bottom, or you can start at the stem end. You know, or you can start in the middle. It doesn't matter, and that's the way life is. You know, it's.
But
Now,
you've got to kind of forget self, I think, in this too. You got to think of others besides yourself.
I never think of myself first.
Yeah.
She comes first. You see now, but I obligated myself. See, I committed myself right from the very beginning. I've got enough love for both of us. So if I can't express at least 60%. In other words, I express my desires, and then that's minor. See, but her happiness and contentment is what I've been working for all these years. It's got to start there and stop there. Now, it's just like now she was talking about the good Lord creating this marriage, and to me. Now, I told your aunt yesterday, and I've told people throughout the world, that God selected Carolyn for me 40 days before conception. And he used her mother to build Carolyn for me. And Carolyn was born for me, and me for her, to produce the union that we produced. And now I was in a airport here not too long ago, and a lady was sitting across the aisle from me, just about the distance you are, and she said, "Well, I can't recall anything in my life. I just don't remember anything about my life." Well, I remember my life almost in detail by days. And if you want me to recall something, well, I can almost tell you what day it took place. It's just like I know that I had my first date with her on January the 2nd because of what happened on the 1st. And I know,
and I can't dispute him because I don't remember
because
dates.
She don't remember.
I don't remember dates, so
Yeah,
he could tell me that, and I don't know.
And now I don't know whether it was on the 17th or 18th, the day I proposed to her, because I don't know exactly how long it took us to come from Fort Riley to Marshall. But anyway, it was one of those days, and I still carry it. The picture I carried my billfold was a picture that was taken the next day at a certain person at a certain place in Marshall, and I remember where that was.
You remember the little picture he keeps in his billfold with him in his boots and breeches?
And I've carried that, and I show it wherever I go. And now, you see, now, really, when you, and she's got all the qualifications I was looking for. She has intelligence, she has looks, she has character, she has family, and now you see now my mother is sort of responsible for me feeling towards Carolyn the way I did, because when I was growing up, she gave me some advice. She said, "Now, Joe, don't you let that little girl take advantage of you." You know, and she was concerned about the family that little girl came from.
The one he was going
See?
with at that time.
In other words, my mother was questioning the environment in which that little girl, she might have been just as sweet, as far as I know, she was just as sweet the day first date I had with her as the last date I had with her, but I obeyed my mother. I said, "Now,
She didn't like her, the
don't
girl's
you
mother.
let that little girl take advantage of you." See, and I can.
I think his mother approved of my family. She
Yeah,
thought they were a
yeah,
nice
yeah. See,
family,
yeah.
and she was
In other
proud
words,
that
yeah.
he was hooking up with us.
She got.
And mother liked Joe.
Yeah,
So.
she could find nothing wrong, as long as, see, mother wanted me to be one thing. She wanted me to be a Texas A&M graduate. And when I graduated when I became an officer in the United States Army, wearing boots and breeches. Now she became a proud mother. She's already proud. But now when I became an officer in the United States Army, now she became a proud mother. And she didn't mind telling anybody.
That's right.
And then she was extremely proud of me marrying Carolyn. She couldn't find a thing wrong with that relationship. And now there were people in the community that felt the same way. Now her boss, the superintendent of schools, and my boss, the superintendent of schools, said when he heard we were married that it was the best union in Marshall he'd ever heard of. Now I heard that through the grapevine. He didn't tell me, but someone else did. So as long it when
Well, it's lasted for 54 years. Something must have been right.
and so see now.
We got two good kids.
You see now
Grandkids.
see now I'm gonna tell you about her
He
determination.
wants to do this off.
You gonna cut it off?
No, go ahead.
Well now, you see when
Finish
she
it
was
up.
I wasn't there when she gave birth to your father. What happened is I took her to the hospital and I hadn't had breakfast, and I thought she was going to take forever to have for Randy. I didn't know how far, and that was my first event for me. So I went and got in the car and went to have breakfast at home. Well, when I got to the house, mother was at the back door hollering, "Back up and go back to the hospital. Carolyn's done gone to the delivery room." Well, when I got there, that's where she was. She was in the delivery room. And so the first I saw Randy, your daddy, before I saw his mother. And so the lady brought your daddy out through the swinging doors and showed me my son. Well, but now when she had Candy, I was there. Now she started about 7 o'clock in the morning, and she had Candy about 3 o'clock, 3:30 that afternoon. And now the character that she showed, and going through childbirth, told me and convinced me that I had married what I was looking for. And I've never questioned it. I didn't question it before then. That just put a final determination on what she is. And so.
It's just because I didn't holler. That's what.
In other words, now.
The lady in the next room was cussing her husband out, for getting her pregnant, and When I heard, I can't say anything, but Papa held my hand
See,
and squeezed
yeah,
it.
see,
So that-
I held her hand. In other words, this new thing called
Lamage.
Lamaze. We were performing Lamaze 50 years ago. This coming September the 24th, we went through it for 3 or 4 hours. I sat right there, and the lady came in, and she said, I said, it's about time for she to be going to the living room. And she put her hand on her stomach, and she let there for a little while. She said, "Wow, she's not ready to go to the living room." She said, her pains are, I haven't felt one. I said, lady, she's having pains every half a second here. And see, she was squeezing my hand, but she was relaxed here. And the woman was expecting contractions here, but she was, and Lord, she
Well, anyway,
you
let's
get
get
an
off this.
examination, and next thing I know, she's coming back with a stretcher, and Candy was born in no time.
Okay. So anyway,
But,
that's.
See, when you,
But
and-
we're I think we're trying to say we feel like we're both are blessed to have each other, and the years have slipped right on by.
you know,
54 of
But no, she's.
So
But now,
I
see
believe
now.
it's going to last.
You see now she, one thing that I had a hard time convincing her when she was raising our children, don't hit them with your hand. Get you something between you and them. If it's nothing but a one-sheet newspaper, just roll it up, and that's all it takes. Well, now, and it's just that simple. When you hit a child with your fist, well, then that tells them I'm gonna hit back with my fist.
I didn't ever hit them with my fist.
Well, same thing. That's
It
your
wasn't.
hand.
That's not my fist. That's a fist right there.
Well, your hand. You know, palm of your hand. You know.
He'd always say, "Go get a belt," and I'd say,
Get-
"By the time I get the belt, I'm out of the notion of hitting them." You know.
You see.
so-
You see. Am I telling you anything?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's
Okay.
let's finish
I've
this.
done
He
told
doesn't need
him.
this. He doesn't need this.
No,
Well,
He'll find out for himself.
he asked me.
Shh, okay, listen, he's talking.
I wanted to ask you one last question.
He's got it cut off, honey. I'm blowing
Does
my
he?
nose.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Did you have it cut off?
Oh my Lord.
I told you I was giving you a signal.
Well, quit talking and listen to it. Okay.
I wanted to ask you one last question.
I done over answered the last one.
That's right.
Do you feel that your life has been successful? Are you happy with your life? With what you've done with your life?
You answered.
Um,
I
don't
wouldn't
think-
change a day.
I wouldn't change anything. I don't know that I have put my mark on the world like a lot of people have, but I think as far as just plain old average people, I think we've tried to live a life that maybe would be a little bit of examples for the children. And
Well, now,
I don't feel like that. Now you all will remember us, but you know we haven't. done
I
anything
was complimented the
spectacular.
other day at Walmart by a lady. She was a total stranger to me, but just looking in my face, she could see that I was an innocent person with a smile. You see, and so she had to spend some time for her partner that came from Dangerfield with her to get checked out of the line, and she came over and sat down by me. And so, in other words, as long as, now the other day, another day, I had a coffee cup in my hand, and I was going to go get the coffee cup filled up so I could bring the coffee to Mimo. And the lady was waiting on people, and she saw that I was with this coffee cup. She went and got the container and came around and poured my coffee cup and went back. And so it's just that way.
He's
Now,
just so-
this morning when I went and got her a coffee cup, I didn't have to ask anybody anything. The lady was waiting on a customer there, and she quit waiting on that customer and went and got the coffee pot and filled up my coffee cup and went back to that person.
So that's proof enough for you.
That he's appreciated or something. They
No,
probably wouldn't do that for me.
I'm friendly, you know.
You friendly?
I say good morning, hello, how are you today?
Yes.
And
never meets a stranger.
Just like this morning, I told the same girl that this is my grandson, and she's not from Atlanta. She's from Lufkin. See? Huh? Well, now, and let her know that I knew that she had told me she was from Lufkin, and that I remembered it. See? And so it takes little things like that to make people realize that you think a little bit of them. And long face don't get nothing done.
Well, I'm just thankful for having each other and having what the Lord has granted us.
Sit down. No, see now.
So Joe, let's finish this
No,
up.
I ain't finishing up. I'm going to say this.
He's running out of tape.
Well, no, I don't care if he runs off the tape. Now, you see, she produced 2 children, and both of them graduated valedictorian
Yes.
of their high school graduating. Now, that just didn't happen. Now, every night from the time they were born, she started reading to them to sleep. And so therefore they knew what reading was, and they had listened to the English language read to them until they could go to sleep before they ever started school. Then when they started school, she would go to the kitchen table after the supper, and she would have books with them. Now she would teach them how to read. She would help them with the math, even though she's not good at math. And now our children never went to school a day in their life that they weren't prepared to go to school. And I say that to say this: all children are educated at the mother's knee, not in the classroom. They go to the classroom to receive what to learn, but they learn at the mother's knee. And if they can't find a mother's knee to learn, they'll always be stupid. We saw one this morning.
Yes. Well, you better kiss her and end this tape.
I'm through.
Do you want to kiss me?
Huh?
He says, kiss me.
About where you're standing was an old house site that was built years and years ago, and then about 20 feet behind you, under the walnut tree, was a well, and that's where a family lived for years and years. This farm was first developed in about 1847. That's when it became a headright, John C. Ray headright. Then when I bought it in 1951, I built a fence right along the road here and all the way around it. Put some cows on it. And then about 1968, I got some money from the Farm Home Administration, and I built a house right here in this general location. And as you drive up, this driveway here would have been where the garage would have been. And so the house starts right there, and it went 50 feet back the other way. And then in 1961, spring of 1961, I built those 2 barns. And in 61, well, I went into the hog business, and the hog pen was from here down to the bottom of the hill, about 2.5 acres I had in hog. Then along that fence, well, where the gate is there, I had a fence on around the house, and I kept my cows in this pasture there. And that's my tool shed there, where I kept my tractor and shop where I did welding and changed batteries and greased tractors and kept my oil and my tools and equipment to run the farm with. And those barns cost $3,200, and the labor to build those barns was $750. They're one of the best built barns in this part of the country. They've just got 5 rafters and the trusses rather, and you might walk down there and take a picture of those barns. Down there has got a shed put on built the same way, and it's now about 39 by 60. That's where I fed my cattle, kept my hay. My corrals and so forth been taken down, but they were down there about where that tractor is, along where it has been mowed and hadn't been mowed. My corral was where it hadn't been mowed down there. Then my hog pens was down in here, and over in that place there. Kept my boys one place and sows another. Kept those trees down there so the hogs would have shade to get under, so they wouldn't have to be out in the sun all the time. Built post fence, and my fence there was wood, creosote post and creosote lumber.
Tell us about the house.
Sir?
Tell us about the house behind you.
Well, now, when I burnt this house down, in January of '73, I decided I'd move the house over there because that looked to me like a better building site. And so I got a bulldozer and knocked it down and straightened it up and smoothed it up. And then I started laying the foundation on that house in April of 1974, and I got it completed, and we moved in it sometime in December of 1975. And I built the house for Carolyn, and it was for her specifications. And there's no house built like that in Cass County. It's got a floating beam foundation. Little small bushes to the left of that is an old house, is an old well site for a house site. There used to be people lived in that house, in a house that was located there. So this farm at one time had 2 families living on it. That's for years and years. It could be in the neighborhood of over 100 years old. And there's a lot of good lumber in it. Now, one time my lights went out in the house, and so I went and called the electric people, and they came out and put my electricity back on. And as he was driving down the driveway going home, he looked over and saw 3 squirrels that had been hit by a lightning and had been killed, and they were laying there on the ground. So that tree's been hit by lightning several times. And there's a mark or 2 on the other side where it may show where it's been hit. They're more than likely. Now, right up there, that limb yonder, it was hit by lightning. See, the limb doesn't. The growth rate of those trees.
When were they planted?
1961. Randy planted those trees when I was at Fort Hood, Texas.
Those 3 trees?
No, Fort Polk, Texas. there. Now, that tree there is a blackjack oak, and it's a beautiful tree. Hard make is known as the Powell House. It was owned by Maurice Powell when we rented from him. He was employed in San Antonio, and Carolyn and I and Randy and Candy lived in this house 4 years, from 1954, the latter part of 1954, until we moved to the farm in 1958. And it was a beautiful home then, and it's a beautiful home now. It had it was built, I don't know what year, but it was built in the early 1900s, if not late 1800s. And other than living in it, that's about all I know. It's got a cellar, and it's got a rooms upstairs, and has several nice pecan trees. That pecan tree here, about where I'm standing when I moved here, was a log cabin built out of pine log, and it was built back during the WPA days when they were trying to teach farmers how to can food and put food in cans, and then this was a cannery that was run by the WPA people, and then after the war and so forth, they quit that program, but yet the log cabin was still on the school property, and I taught vocational agriculture in that log cabin. And then I went to work for the Soil Conservation Service, and they built another building. Well, 3 or 4 years later, they built another building. But the teacher that took my place did not teach here. He went to the new school building that they added to the school about the year I left. And it's built in a Y. The Y going east-west by the D-house. That building, and this is one going north and south. That was the one they built on to in 1955, 56, along with the gymnasium. That's the time I went. Now, right here is 2 buildings. That's a metal building. This is a brick. And now when I came back to Queen City Schools, they had this metal building here. And I was under the impression that they built that metal building for a vocational ag department. And so I moved in. And I taught there for several years. My students, I taught your father in that building. And I moved in there in 1959, September. One day I was teaching in there, and it was about January 18th, 19th, somewhere around in there. I was getting ready to go to a meeting of vocational ag teachers in Dangerfield, and I looked at the temperature, and the temperature was 55 degrees with the fan and heater going. And so I made up my mind I was going to do something about it. And I started collecting money, and I collected $4,000, and including concrete foundation. And me and bricklayer built that building on the end of that brick building. There's a unique story there. I was working on it one day after school, and my superintendent came by, and he came down and he said, "We had a school board meeting last night, and that we've come to the conclusion that you're going to ruin 2 buildings." I said, "What 2 buildings?" He said, "Well, the building that you're building onto and the building that you're going to put onto the building you're building onto." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "How are you going to keep him from leaking?" I said, "Well, if I must tell you, you wouldn't believe it. So I'm going to go find somebody else's opinion." And so I went several places looking for a building that was put together like I was going to put this one together. And I couldn't find really what I was looking for that I could take it to him and show it. And so I went to a man that was a carpenter down two doors down across the street. I brought Leroy up here and I asked Leroy, "Well, how would you go about keeping that from leaking?" He says, "Drop this building you're building down 6 inches below the pitch of the building behind you, and on the same pitch and so forth, and then let the decking and let the felt and so forth go up underneath the flashing, and it'll never leak." It's been there since September of 1968, and I've never heard of it leaking yet.
Well, William L. Woodley, William Lawrence Woodley, is the one that built the house, moved part of it in later. And then my grandfather, Jesse, he was the oldest son, so he inherited it, and he married America Harris from over at Kilgore. And they had 3 daughters, and Lois was my mother, the oldest, then Jessie Mae, and then Nora. And they're all gone in a number of years. So the old house, my brother and I ended up inheriting it. So we just had it remodeled and got a medallion for it. It was started in construction about 1873, and don't really know how long it took to do it. And then about 1910, they remodeled the house and added, as the children came along, they gradually added rooms. My grandfather moved in with his wife, and when his father was in ill health, well, they moved back down here and to the farm and stayed here all those years. So we just try to put it back together to make it look like it was as much as we could, and then we added on a den in the back because it was 3 sides of it wouldn't be affected, and I think the historical commission says as long as you've got 3 sides in the original, well, you're all right. So that's about the history of it.
Now he has an older brother named A.K.
Right.
And A.K. and I are the same age.
Right.
And he lives in Houston at this particular time.
He's
and now this is the house that my father came to use the telephone to call Dr. Eads to tell him to come down to deliver me. But now Cousin Jess, his grandfather, and my daddy were first cousins, and my grandfather was a brother to his great grandfather.
Yeah.
And so we all came from Woodley, from William Woodley.
Yeah.
It came from Georgia.
Right.
In 1844, but now our Wingate Woodley came as a young man prior to that, and he's the one that's listed in as being here when Texas was a republic, and it's listed in recorded in some books and so forth that you can have access to.
Wingate came early, and
Yeah.
Wingate had fought in the Cherokee Indian War in Florida, fought another Cherokee Indian War over in, oh, I forgot now, Georgia or someplace. And then while he was here, he joined the army to go down to Mexico with General Zachary Taylor. They went down to all the way to Monterey, signed up for 1 year. And when your enlistment was up then, they discharged you wherever you were.
Yeah.
So a group from Texas, they took the discharge in a year and came on back. And the story goes, heaven forbid any Mexican that they ran across. Because they were...
Oh, you're talking about yourself.
Oh, no, Stuart, no. I've always felt that I was far, far beneath you.
His grandmother was born the year that America became a century, 100 years old.
Yeah, 1876.
1876, and she lived to be about 107.
106, 9 months.
106 and 9 months
Right.
years old.
We always thought she always suspected that she was named because of the centennial year.
Yeah.
But we went back and found some records on her father, and her father had a sister, and the sister's name was America.
Yeah.
So really she was named after some of the family. But we
Well,
didn't know that.
we've enjoyed visiting
Right,
with you, and
right.
thanks for your
Take-
addition to.
Right.
He's getting a little recorded family history,
Right.
and so he could pass it on to his generation.
Take them on down to the cemetery. There's a lot down there.
Yeah, there's a lot down there.
They're down there primarily by father and son and grandson. They just laid out that way. Few
Well,
graves are not
we'll
marked.
see you, and I'm sure
Right,
glad
I'm
we ran
glad
into you.
came.
When Woodley Cemetery, first ancestor that come to Texas, Wingate arrived in the Republic of Texas in 1839 and settled in Harrison County shortly after its formation that year. He received a letter from his father, William, who was born in 1787, in 1840, asking that he leave the lawlessness of this area and return to the safety of his former home in Georgia. Wingate remained, and in 1843 his father and mother, Telelia Michael, left Alabama with their large family and traveled by wagon train to Harrison County. The cemetery began with the burial of their young daughter, Harriet Ellen, here on the family farm in 1844. Woodley family records suggest that this site was set aside for cemetery use in William Woodley 1844 will. The will was subsequently lost and never probated. The family of William and Celelia, 11 children, and their descendants formed the nucleus of the former community of Arlington and account for most of the people buried here. This site property of Woodley descendants for more than 100 years was legally set aside by descendants of George and Carolyn Woodley McDempsey in 1970. Burial here are veterans of the conflict ranging from the Creek Indian War, Alabama, 1836, to the Korean conflict. The Woodley Cemetery Trust was established in 1986 to maintain this site. And all of our ancestors are buried here, except my father is not buried here in my generation, in my family lineage. And now we'll go through the gate, and I'm gonna pull off my hat, huh? My hair, is my hair comb?
Yes, sir.
Not, huh?
Yes, sir.
Now, tell me when. Now, this is the burial site of our grandparent that came to Texas. He was the first one to leave Georgia to come to Texas as a young man. And he arrived in Texas and remained in Texas and was instrumental in his father and mother and sisters coming to Texas. Now, in his lineage, he has a brother and a sister from a former marriage. His father had been married before he married our mother, that was a our grandmother, that was a Michael. And there was a Jonathan Woodley, and we never have been able to find any of the people that would have come from the Jonathan Woodley that was a brother of Wingate Woodley. And Wingate had sisters that married Dempseys and Tillers and many other people that have settled in this part of the country. Now this is our grandmother Jane, that was Wingate's wife. And I don't recall just how she is the mother of my grandfather. If I'm not, and so I don't want to comment and be wrong. You've got to chase the history from someplace else. But Wingate was married several times. He had he was married, and then he had a set of families, and then this wife passed, and he married again and had my grandfather. And just how they are related, I don't know. I should have done some research before it came down. Now, this is my grandfather, Henry H. Woodley, and this is his first wife, Betty Everett Woodley. She was Bert Everett's daughter, and they married, and they had my father was the oldest surviving child of this union here. Now, they lost 3 children in childbirth, when they were young children. 2 of them lived in the neighborhood of 2 years old, and one died a day or 2 after he was born. And their markers are here. And my grandmother, she passed away in the early 1900s, 1908, 1910, somewhere around there. And then my grandfather married a lady by the name of Mattie Powell. And now she had been married before, and she had 2 sons, named Beatty. And she married a man by the name of Beatty, and she had 2 sons, Uncle Herbert and Uncle Edward Beatty, and then she married my grandfather after the passing of my grandmother, and they had some children, five children. One of them was lost. She died several days after her birth in 1920. But now before that, she had a daughter and three sons. Vera Woodley, my aunt, and Archie Woodley, and Bertie Woodley, and Henry H. Woodley, named after his father. And then the daughter that passed, and then a son named Henry Hugh Carwile. Now this is the grave here of Bertie, and this is the grave of Archie, and this is the grave of Henry. Now this is a Lily Bell Newton Woodley, the wife of my father, Robert Hall Woodley, and she was born in September the 18th, 1885, and she passed November the 9th, January the 9th, 1919. And she is the mother of my brother Henry and Viola, my sister Viola, and Mildred. Now the order of birth is Mildred, Viola, Henry Luke, and Robert Floyd. And when she passed away in January of 1919, well, in November of that same year, my father married my mother, and that brought. Now this is the home where I was born, and I was delivered by a midwife right here in this house on about 5 o'clock, September the 17th, 1920. And my mother and father established residence in this house as a young married couple in November of 1919. And she became the immediate mother of four children, Viola, Mildred, Viola, Henry Luke, and Robert Floyd. And she brought with her daughter from a previous marriage, Mary Jim. And we lived here until November of 1928, when the family moved to Marshall so that my older sisters and brothers could continue their education through the 11th grade. We were going to school at Legion Field at that particular time, and Mother and Daddy drove the school bus. When Daddy wasn't driving, Mother would drive, and the school bus, I can remember being parked right in that general area right there. And Daddy would start the truck or school bus that was made from a truck bed. It was all hand built with lumber and so forth. The seats were 12s, the length of the bus. And I can recall riding Tony up and down this road here as a young boy between the ages of 5 and 8. And after my 8th birthday, about 2 months old, we went to Marshall. And it had to be a 26, 27 model, because and I can remember it being there. And now right here in this general area right here and hooked onto this was where we kept the harness for our mules We kept about 4 mules in this general area. And then back behind here is where we used to milk the cow. Attached to this garage was a milk stall for mother to milk her cow and furnish milk and butter for the family. And also in that general area, a little pen, was where I kept Tony. I couldn't turn Tony in with the mules because the mules wouldn't accept him. And the barn was in that general area right there. And the barn was larger than it is today. The barn has deteriorated over the years. It was had a continuation. On this side is where we stored the grain, and on the other side is where we fed the horses, mules rather. And we had one horse named Mabel. So now this little area right out here is where I planted my first acre of cotton, right out there. Now let's go into the house. You should know what the house was like. This was a chimney. When I lived here, the chimney was on this side. It was right here. And Mother's and Daddy's bedroom was here. And the chimney is no longer here. And you can see that the house was built out of 1 by 12 planking, and it was covered by a 1 by 4 to cover up the cracks. And there's a good example of it right here. And here's a good example of the board that it was built out of, a 1 by 12. I see no knots. Now that's where no loose knots at all. There is a knot, and there's a knot, but it's not a loose knot in any way. And now this house was built by my daddy when he was married to his first wife, Lady Bell Newton. And I'm sure that the children were, my brothers and sisters was also born in this house. I never was told, but they must have been born here too. Okay, we're gonna go this way. I have them. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I have a picture of me when I was, before I started walking, in a jumper, jumping up and down in that jumper on this front porch. Of course, the picture don't show me jumping because I'm in one position. But, and so when I was young, we lived right here in this house, and I was born in a bed right on the other side of this house, a wall. Now, right here is a good example. Now, this is dressed one by. It's not a 1 before, but it's a dressed 1 before to give lattice work. So, and this, when it was built, this house was built according to the custom at that particular time. And if you want a name for it, it's the original Western colonial home. It had a front porch all the way across, like on a shed-like roof, and it could be elaborate or it could be built for utility purposes. Now we'll go inside. Now I'm on the other side of the wall that was standing on the outside. Now the house had boards on each side. Now you had your outside board, and then you got the board on the inside, and these boards are going this way on the inside. They're going that way on the outside. And now to break the wind and so forth, they had wallpaper, and the wallpaper was put on to keep as much wind as possible on the outside. And I was born in a bed right here. The fireplace was right there, and I can readily remember it had a mantle about up here, and Mother would keep our medicine, cocoa quinine, to help us live with the malaria on that mountain. And she'd line us up and give us a dose of cocoa quinine out of the same spoon. So Mother and Daddy slept here, and my sisters and brothers slept over there. I don't remember us having a closet. This closet has been built in later days. We had a place to store our clothes, shiffer robes and things of that type. That we moved to town. Now let's go to the kitchen. Now here's the bedroom. Here's the bedroom where the children stayed. They had their fireplace, and it's unique. Now in this room, in that room there, the walls, the boards on the inside went crossways on the outside, and on the inside they go up and down. Now they did that for easy construction. That board, there's no break in it. In other words, that's a 12-foot board, more than likely. It goes from floor to ceiling, and that ceiling is beaded. Got a beaded ceiling. And now here's the kitchen. I'm going into the kitchen, and we had the kitchen right here. And had a cook stove over there. It went on the outside, and the back porch was here where you kept your water, wash your hands and so forth. And this is where we ate, right along here on the table. And some good meals were put on that table right here. Now our garden, I can remember as a child, this area of the 50 acres that's in this field was planted to corn. And then just over the rise there was a road that went all the way through. And then over in that area was the cotton that was used and planted by Jerry Mack, a black family that lived in a house right down about 200 yards from our house. And our source of water was at the top of the hill. And we had to go with buckets of water and bring to the house for bathing, cooking, and other necessities. And I can remember Jerry coming from the harness shed with 2 mules. The mules would follow him, and he would go to the cultivator, whether he was plowing corn or cotton, and he would plow those mules all day just by talking to them. He would not even take the lines off the harness hames. And I'd go to Jerry at noon and ride the horse back, the mule back, when I was a small child. And then we planted corn here. I can remember running out medals with a scooter stock when I was about 7 or 8 years old. They're just big enough to get in the way. Now, we had 50 acres here and 4 acres across the road there with the house on. Then he had 60 acres down below it. And then he had 185 acres in another location. lived here. And that was before 1932. And it might have been even before that. Because I can remember living in this particular home of the George Hall family. But now, right here was, I can remember coming eating dinner and so forth at my grandmother's and playing in the backyard. Now this field down here was a meadow at that particular time, and Uncle John and Luke Uncle John was out there cutting bitter weeds, the way I was been told, and Luke was out there with him as a young person, and there was some hogs out there, and Luke was running the hogs out of the way. Well, when the hogs got to the sickle, they jumped over the sickle that was cutting grass, and Luke was running up to the sickle, and Uncle John could see Luke coming, and he stopped the mules, but the sickle took one more swath, and that one more swath cut Luke's leg just above the ankle to the bone. And John gathered him up, leaving the mules in the field, and brought him to the house. And his grandmother, step-grandmother really, Miss Mattie we called her, and I called her Miss Mattie because everybody else did, went to the fireplace and took some soot out of the fireplace and put into the wound so it would help coagulate the wound, and now he's still got a dark spot on his leg. You taking it?
Yes, sir.
And that's all I know. Now this is my father, Robert Hall Woodley. He was born February 17th, 1986, and he died November the 30th, 1947 on his farm feeding cattle. And then my mother, she was born May the 21st, 1897, and she passed September the 17th, 1952. They married November the 7th, 1990. Here is my sister Viola and her husband. She married Herman Allen and Viola Woodley Allen. She was born October the 18th, 1913. Died June the 20th, 1997. Herbert was born March 1st, 1909. He passed September 21st, 1981. Your grandmother's grandfather, on her mother's side, Carl, starts with a K, Crowder. He was born 1872 and died 1925. And then his wife, Rosa Crowder, was born in 1889 and she died in 1950. And they produced two children. One was Rosie. Wait a minute, I'm a little bit lost now. Stop it. Oh, there is your great-great-grandmother, Miss Paul. Now, on your mother's side, this is Albert Johnston Hamill, and he was born March the 15th, 1892, and he died April the 7th, 1972. And then Mother Hamill, she was born in Carrie Sophie Hamill. She was born September the 22nd, 1895. And right here is where your grandmother, Carolyn Hamill Woodley, was raised from 6 or 7 years old until I married her March the 4th, 1946. I didn't knock on the door too many times, but I sure would have liked to. But it's hard to be 250 miles getting an education and courting too. Now right here in this house, in this home, in my opinion, the prettiest girl ever raised in March. Moved to town in 1928, November 1928. At this particular site was Barrett's Grocery. And Barrett operated a grocery here for a little while. And then Nowlin's Mattress Factory moved in. And Nowlin's Mattress Factory was here for several years until I'd say about 1934, somewhere around there. So might have been earlier than that. Because when I was 12 or 13 years old, I was playing with cowboy and Indians with Eugene Nowlin and Carl Nowlin. Carl was in Carolyn's class in high school. They graduated together. They went all the way through East End together, through junior high and high school. And then my father, my father and mother bought this store from a man by the name of Brown. Brown ran Matheson Drug in Marshall, Texas. And so mother and daddy bought this store from them. And when we first moved to town, we lived in that house right there. And a man by the name of Langston owned that house. And, he lived in another part of town at that particular time. He worked for United Gas. And then a family by the name of Kearns moved out of town to Fort Worth, and that house there became vacant. And mother and daddy bought that house. Now what year they bought it, I don't know, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 32. Well, we lived in this house about a year and a half. And so about 30 is when they bought that house there. And that's where mother and daddy raised their family. And from that family, from that house there, we all got married and established our own family. Now, about where that building is, not connected with the house, we had a large Mahan pecan tree, and it would produce pecans about the size of a person's thumb from the knuckle down. And mother could make the best pecan pie from that pecan tree, and we would gather the pecans, and peel them and shell them and sell them. And then when I was taking vocational agriculture, I went to Tyler and I came to pick up some trees for the vocational ag department using my daddy's truck. And I brought back some pecan trees, and I planted those 2 pecan trees on the left-hand side. It must have been 35, 36, somewhere around there. But it must have been 37 because I was learning to drive, and I started driving when I was 17 years old, 16, 17 years old. So it was in that particular time. Now there's a bridge right there. Now there's a creek running under that bridge, and that creek runs under this concrete and comes out down here before you get to the red light. Now, that pecan tree was, now if the pecan tree in our backyard was still living, it would be as large as that tree there. It was a huge pecan tree when I was growing up. But they either cut it down, I think, for safety reasons. And now, that building yonder was a cabinet shop. The men that operated that cabinet shop was also employed as in the cabinet department and building cars and doing the woodwork in railroad cars, and they were accomplished cabinet workers, and they built that building there to build furniture at night and so forth, from cedar, oak. They could build some of the most beautiful cabinets you've ever seen. And that's now me and my Shetland pony. We would there was the only sidewalk in town was that sidewalk right in front of our house. And now that driveway wasn't there. That driveway has been put in there since my day. And there was a fence going from the edge of the house there on down to where that sign is. And that's where I kept my Shetland pony most of the time. At night I would put him in a smaller enclosure. And what he got, I had to feed him. Wasn't much grass. And I moved from there about September. My mother loaded me in a pickup truck, back end of a pickup truck, right there at the end of that sidewalk. Now there wasn't a curb there when I left here. That was a ditch. Wasn't a curb. That curb's been put in there since I left. And so I walked across a plank bridge and put myself in the back end of a 37, 38 model International pickup truck. Now, I remember our baseball field being down at the northwest corner of this property, and some of us would ride horses to school, and when we did, we'd put them down underneath those trees to tie them out in the shade and so forth. That's when we were in about the 6th grade. And now, when we wasn't playing baseball, we were practicing football in about the same area. And then from here on down would be our football practice area. And we had a lady football coach named Miss Harmon. And there was a man, I don't recall his name, that was a senior in high school, and he was a 5th year student in high school, and he had used his eligibility playing football. He would come down and help us, or help her, teach us blocking and running and so forth. And just luckily, East End won this community championship that year. We played the 10 schools, and we played each other twice during the year, and we didn't get beat. The reason we didn't, there was a tackle that weighed 175 pounds on the left side named Joe Woodley, and he'd tackle anything. And there was a man, two men in the backfield, Raymond Newton and Bill Ainsworth, and couldn't anybody catch them. They was fast as they could be. And Raymond went on and played. He and I played football together during our high school days, and he later became a coach in Odessa, Texas. And then right here is our school. And those windows on the left, that was the music department. That's where we learned to sing. Miss Aiken was our teacher, and she played the piano and taught us to sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, do. And the stage was in there too. Where the windows aren't was where the stage was, and we'd put on plays and so forth. Then this building here also had a basement. Now those windows at the bottom, they're in a basement. And then you had the second story. That's the next windows, and then the story above that was the 3rd story. So count the basement, it had 3 stories. And we would, in inclement weather, we would play in the basement. And then also the cafeteria was in the basement right beyond that door there. Now, this was our library. The second story windows there was our library. And then the window, the windows above that was where Mrs. Sledge, Miss Lena Sledge, taught history. And next to that, Ms. Nesbitt taught math. And then next to that, Ms. Broadstreet taught English. And then that was for sixth graders. And then the grade schools would be on down in the lower grades there. We went through the first grade through the sixth grade here. And usually we just had, I guess we'd have the low sixth and the high sixth. Now, in other words, we had sixth grade that would start in September, and then there would be a first grade start in September, and then in January, all people that had had a birthday between September the 1st and the beginning of school in January would be in the second class in the first grade, and we'd go that way all the way through. And now, we had our teachers was Ms. Watt was the principal, Ms. Nesbitt, she taught math, Ms. Broadstreet, she taught English, Ms. Bryant, she taught art, Ms. Peoples, she taught the fourth grade, and Mrs. Maud McCoy, she taught the third grade, and Miss Western, she taught the first grade. And I don't remember the second grade teacher, I think Mrs. Brian also taught the fifth grade, and in penmanship. She taught art, and Mrs. McGrill taught. Dr. R.P. Hamill, a dentist, had his own dentist office here and raised his family, 2 boys and 2 girls. There was Albert Johnston Hamill, my wife's father, your grandfather, great-grandfather, and your great-great-grandfather lived in this house. And there was a man that lived in Dallas. He raised his family in Dallas. And then there were 2 unmarried sisters, Aunt Louise and Annie lived here. Now Carolyn's half-sister, Ruth, lives in this house now. So it has been in 3 generations. Dr. Hamill, and then Doc Hamill, that they called Albert John. Right here is the church that your grandmother, Carolyn, was christened and continued going to church and young peoples and so forth. And the organist in this particular church took her when she was about 11 years old and began to teach her special music. And he told me one time, he says, Carolyn has the most perfect voice I've ever heard, and she's one of the most wonderful students a teacher could have. I can tell her one time how to hit a note, and I never have to tell her the second time. And to me, she's got the most beautiful voice singing church music I have ever heard. Now her mother, Mother Hamill, Carrie Sophie Crowder Hamill, brought more young people from 1 year old right on through to, they went into another department in that building right there. Everybody child that went through that church. Mother Hamill was their Sunday school teacher in the kindergarten ages. And you can talk to people in Marshall today that went through her program, and they still. And the office was in that behind that window there, and right over here, right behind those two windows right there, is where I sat in a chair and watched the Coca-Cola bottles come through, and I would, if the rat wasn't washed out, well, I'd pick the bottle up and we'd try it over again the second time. Now, that was the job I worked myself into. The first job I had was delivering Coca-Cola on a delivery truck, and we would come through that gate there and fill the truck up and reload the truck for the next morning, and then we would go on down here, and then we would park the truck in the storage place. Right behind this building here was a storage place, so the truck would be parked at night. Now that building there wasn't here. That's been a new construction. Now right here, this building here is where they built boxes and rebuilt boxes and repaired boxes that the Coca-Cola was carried in, 6-ounce bottles. And that's what we did. And I had three. I started work as a swamper, and then my last summer that I worked here, when I was going to Texas A&M University, I worked in the modeling department, and I went from a $9 a day job to a $2.25 a day hour job. So I got a promotion. That's the depot, Marshall Depot, and the area for the TP shops. In other words, all of the TP Railways equipment was maintained here. The chair cars were built here, and all of the other cars was built here. The railroad wheels were molded and foundered here, and that was the dock. Over there is the viaduct that went across the railroad, and and the railroad separated North Marshall from Van Zant and West Marshall from East Marshall. Now right here is where your grandmother asked me if I would go through those doors and order her a Coca-Cola. And so we went through those doors, and I ordered her a Coca-Cola and went along that window there and sat out in a booth. And that's where she told me she would be my bride. And for 54 years, she has been my bride. This past March the 4th. And so I got on the train there. Went from there and got on the train and went to Fort Worth, riding behind Mr. Hamill and Mr. Little, and I was scared to death, and I didn't tell Mr. Hamill that his daughter had decided to marry me. And so, now that took place somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 days after the 15th. So it was on the 24th, 26th, I don't remember Christmas, so it must have been on 23rd, 24th no, it was after Christmas, so it couldn't have been. It was in January. January the 24th, 25th, somewhere around there. That was the date that when she said she was married. Then I went back to Fort Riley at the replacement training center and started working as a brand new second lieutenant. One Saturday, I said, time for me to take charge. So I went and got my marriage license, and I called her, and I asked her if March the 4th would be satisfactory, and she says I could see no reason why. And she got on that train, going in that direction, with her mother and her aunt, and came to the depot at Manhattan, Kansas, and I met her at the depot about 9 o'clock one Thursday morning, one Friday morning, singing "Everything's Going My Way," and it was 100% true, and it's still. Now this is the First United Methodist Church in Marshall, and this was the church that I was christened in on Easter Sunday, my 13th birthday. And then this is also the church where I was in the Boy Scout troop ball. And in the building behind me there is where, on the other side of the patio, it wasn't there then, was the building that we had our scout meetings in. And the meeting I learned to steal the bacon, which is a activity that we Boy Scouts participate in. And I continued going to the church here spasmodically. I wasn't near as active in church work as your mother was, my wife, your grandmother was. And when I got married to Carolyn, I joined the Presbyterian church because she was more active in the Presbyterian church, and I didn't want to take her away from her church. So I joined her church, and we remained Presbyterians until we moved to Queen City. And when we moved to Queen City, there wasn't a Presbyterian church in the community. So we joined the Methodist church, and we are still Methodist, active in the Queen City Methodist Church, where we grew our children from 3 years old and 2 and 3 years old until they were married. My daughter was married in that church, and my son, having married a Houston girl, married Houston. And so I got is the Carl Brown. And Rosie Crowder's home. And here was Mother Hamill, was living here with her mother and father. They was in the bakery business when she and Papa Hamill married. She married Doc Hamill, that was his nickname. And they moved into the home with his wife, with her mother, and they continued living here with their mother until Mr. Crowder died. And after Mr. Crowder's death, Mr. Hamill purchased an 11-acre farm out on Highway 80, on what's known as the old Shreveport Highway now, and moved his family out there for a rural environment rather than from downtown Marshall. Now, I want to say one other thing on the other side of the house here. Now, they have changed the front of the house from the East Houston street to a street here I don't know the name of. Now the house next to that, I have a picture of me on my Shetland pony taken by Mrs. Mildred Bedell when I was in her Sunday school class at the Methodist church that we've just left. And I was still have that picture in my possession. And one of these days it'll end up in your possession. Now, exactly what year they moved from this house, to the country. I can't recall, but Carolyn knows she was going to school, and so she's 6, 7 years old. And now across the street was a grocery store, Bedell's Grocery. It's no longer there. I used to know everybody that owned, that lived in these houses along here. A friend of mine that I played high school football with, and also a distant cousin, his mother and my daddy were first cousins. She was an Everett, and my daddy's mother was an Everett, so her daddy and my daddy's mother were brothers. She and her husband and 3 boys lived in that brown house over there. Ruel Harkins was his name. He had a son named R.L. and Henry Burton and Hugh Gordon. And they moved from here to Austin so that their sons could attend Texas University and play for the University of Texas Longhorns. And Henry Burton was the center for the team that won national championship. And Henry Burton was selected that year as the Iron Man for the football team. He played more minutes that year on the football team than any other player. I terminate my discussion. And then I'll lean over and kiss.
Okay.
Yesterday when we were taking the pictures, there's one paramount place I forgot to take you to, and that was Marshall High School. So I could show you the ledge that I was sitting on, watching your grandmother walk down the sidewalk and across the street and up the steps. I just wished I had have thought about we turning to the right and going to Marshall High School instead of turning to the left, going around the square. Now, I'm gonna kiss you.